So the DMLs in Apex. The first DML that you kind of already know is the update DML statement. You have a database and you have Apex code. And those two entities, they're kind of different, right? So they don't really have anything shared. And the way to connect them is with the SOQL queries. So you need to query some records from the database, here, the records, into the Apex code, into your runtime. Then you kind of modify those records, and then you update them. So this is quite a frequent workflow that you definitely have in your work, and maybe not only with Apex, also with flows. You get some opportunities, or opportunities are in some way triggered with a triggered record flow, and you modify them, and then you have to update some data in the system. The only one thing interesting about update is that you don't need to have the whole information about the record. So you don't actually need this part in a lot of execution. So you don't really need to query data in a lot of cases. And the reason for that is because the way the database in Salesforce works is by having an ID, unique ID for all your records in the database. And it means that to update a record, you only need to know the ID of the record. Here's an example. So let's say you want to remove phone number from contacts. And the only one thing that you get is the set of IDs. The most obvious solution would be actually to go and query those contacts so that you can modify them, right? Because if you look at our workflows, we need first to query them and then modify, because here we only have the IDs. But the thing is, you don't really need to query them. Instead of that, here on the line 3, first you create a list of contacts. And then you iterate through the contact IDs that you have. And you create an Apex object that contains the ID of your contact. And then you set the phone to empty value. And then you add those contacts here into the contact list. And then you update those contacts. And this is enough for Salesforce to understand that you actually want to update this particular contact because it knows the ID. And then it knows that it has to set the phone to empty string. So it's gonna clear the phone field. And what I said previously about DML statements, that we have kind of looked for how many DML statements we have, and we should optimize for having less DML statements. The same goes for SOQL queries. It's not super rule that you always have to look at how many DML statements and that you have to count them. But in most cases, you kind of should think about it. And if you can use less SOQL queries, and if you can use less DML statements, then you kind of should. So in this case, we are saving this SOQL query because we can use immediately update statement. Insert. So insert is the simplest one, right? Because insert, it doesn't require you to have anything or to get anything from the database. It's only one direction. So with the insert, you're taking something that you create in the Apex code, and you basically send it, or you can kind of imagine as you throw it into the database. Here's an example of something that you, for example, can't do. You cannot take a list of integers and insert them into the system because there's no such thing as integer in the database, right? So in the database in Salesforce, you have the records. And the records, they have IDs, fields, and so on. So there's no integer there. But what you can do instead is insert a list of contacts, right? And here in this example, I create a list of contacts with 3 contacts. And they have the only one field called last name, which is the only one systemly required field by default on the contacts. So you can insert here a contact. And it's a best practice if you have more than one record to insert it in the form of list. So for example, you want to insert 2 contacts, instead of going and saying, here's the contact and then insert contact 1 and then here's contact 2, insert contact 2. It's better to put them into the list and then insert the whole list together. The reason why you should always use lists is because you have only a certain amount of DML statements that you can execute for one transaction, for one runtime of your code. For DML statements is 150. So you're only allowed to execute 150 of those insert statements. So you need to kind of think about how many you have, and if you can, instead of using 2, you can use only 1 insert statement and insert the whole list. You definitely should be able to do that. And another DML statement that we have is upsert. So upsert is kind of a combination between insert and update. So up goes from update and sert from insert. That's actually, so I make fun here with a meme about upsert, but upsert is actually one of the most powerful, I think, and it saved my life so many times in Salesforce development when I was working as a developer. So upsert is basically kind of built-in logic around updating and inserting. And with upsert, you can save quite a lot of these DML statements limits. So with upsert statement, Salesforce will call insert if the record doesn't have ID, and it will call update if the record already have the ID. So you can have basically a list of a bunch of different records. Some of them have ID, some of them don't, and that's going to be treated by Salesforce, and Salesforce will basically do the logic by itself. And you don't need to write the logic and see, okay, those records are already with ID, so I have to update them. Those are without ID, so I have to insert. No, you save DML statements, you save Apex, you save line coverage. Salesforce does it for you. It's awesome, but what would be the use case? It's kind of a little bit hard to come up with a use case that you can basically execute like this with in developer console, because this statement is really not that much used in if you just want to write some simple script. So here's kind of example, a little bit the last example, but a little bit modified. So you want to upsert 5 contacts, right? So you get the contact IDs, and for the first 5 contacts, you want to delete phone number. And if there is less than 5 contacts, you want to insert new contacts. And again, you get only the contact IDs. This is not the real world. Probably you wouldn't have this task in the real world because why would you do such a weird logic? But who knows? Who knows? There are different business processes out there. So what we do, first we count how many times do we have the contact, right? So here counter plus, and we do basically the same as we did in the previous example. That's for the update, right? This is where you want to clear the phone field. And then if we still don't have 5 contacts, so if we have here only 2 contacts, for example, we want to insert new contacts. And for that, we have here a loop that starts at the counter. So we counted till 2, for example. So we're going to start with 2, and then we go till 5, and we will execute it until we have 5 contacts. And this contact is going to have some just weird last name. And then the beauty of the upsert statement, that we basically throw those contacts into the same pot, into the same list as the contacts that we want to update. So at the end, when we are by the line 36, we're going to have in the list contacts with IDs and without IDs. So this is going to be a very mixed list. And with only one DML statement, with upsert statement, we can execute what we want. So this is the beauty of the upsert statement. Where they're used, they're not used in those simple cases. They're usually used in integrations quite a lot. And it's usually some kind of combination with the external ID. For example, you have some weird third-party system, and you store some data there. But that system doesn't recognize or doesn't have any functionality around saving Salesforce IDs. It has own IDs. So you have to synchronize the data between Salesforce and third-party system by the external ID. So what you do, you don't really know if there's already records of this data in the system, so just call upsert, and then another powerful part of the upsert statement is that you can specify there another field that you want upsert upon. For example, it can be another ID, not necessarily the ID that we have in the Salesforce. So this is one of the use cases. Another use case is some kind of duplicate management. We can think about something. We can think about some kind of data migration. But usually they're used in integrations with some kind of combination with external IDs. That's why it's a little bit hard to illustrate with simple examples what they're actually for in Apex. And the last DML statement is delete. Basically works the same way as the previous two, so just deletes all the records. So I don't think that we should go much deeper into the delete statement. It's quite straightforward. Thank you.